The shouting hit first. A man's voice, sharp, entitled, cut across the check-in counter like a snapped cable. Can someone tell her this isn't the line for passengers? She's holding everyone up. Cameras shifted. Heads turned. And the young black woman in the Navy crew uniform didn't even blink. Ariana Lewis kept her hand on the counter, steady as stone, while the blonde agent beside her slammed a call button and barked into the phone as if reporting a threat. "Security, we have a situation. Possible impersonation." The crowd murmured. Someone scoffed. "No way she's a pilot." And still, Ariana didn't move. She just looked forward, quiet, unreadable, like she'd seen this play out 100 times before and already knew exactly how it would end. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to Ariana. The agent's voice rose higher, fraying at the edges. "Ma'am, step aside. Crew members don't check in here. This counter is for actual pilots." Her tone carried that familiar sting. Not confusion, not protocol. Just certainty that Ariana didn't belong in the uniform she wore. The man beside her jabbed a finger toward Ariana's chest. "Yeah, stop pretending. I fly every week. I know what pilots look like." The implication hit harder than the words. The fluorescent lights above made every sneer sharper, every stare colder. Someone in the back whispered, "She's probably trying to use the crew lane to skip the line." Another chimed in, "There's no way she's flying a plane looking like that." Ariana finally turned her head, slow and measured, meeting the man's eyes without raising her voice. Her jaw tightened, not in anger, but in a kind of practiced restraint, the kind that comes from years of swallowing insults delivered with absolute confidence. The agent slammed her hand on the counter again. "Show ID if you really think you're crew." But when Ariana reached into her pocket, the woman stepped back as if offended by the calmness itself. "No, step aside first. We're calling airport security." Phones lifted. A ripple of anticipation spread through the line. People love a spectacle, especially when they think they already know the story. And yet, Ariana didn't flinch, didn't defend herself, didn't explain, because she knew something none of them did. Every assumption being made in front of her was about to collapse in real time. And she didn't need to raise her voice to make it happen. The tension at the counter did not ease after that first outburst. It hardened. The blonde agent held the phone tighter against her ear, speaking in clipped, urgent tones that made it sound as if Ariana Lewis had walked in carrying a threat rather than a crew badge. The man beside her, red in the face, muttered under his breath about people pretending to be staff, while passengers craned their necks for a better look. Ariana remained still, but inside she recognized every look, every assumption, every whispered judgment. It was the same expression she had seen at 19 when she arrived at flight school orientation wearing a secondhand uniform shirt that did not quite match the others. A classmate had leaned over and whispered, "She must be lost." Another instructor had asked if she was there to shadow the maintenance team. Those words did not sting anymore, not the way they once had, but they lived somewhere in her memory like old turbulence she had learned to fly through. The blonde agent finally set the phone down and planted both hands on the counter. "Ma'am, I am only going to say this one more time. Step aside. Real pilots are checking in." She spoke with the confidence of someone who believed protocol belonged to her alone. Ariana lifted her eyes and met the agent's stare with a calmness that made the woman's voice falter for a split second. The man to Ariana's right pointed again, louder this time. "Why is she even wearing that uniform? Where did she get it?" His tone grew harsher with each word, the kind of escalating anger that tries to mask insecurity with volume. A few passengers shifted uncomfortably, but no one stepped in. Not yet. Then, from the far end of the counter, a young employee with a badge reading trainee cleared his throat. His voice was low at first, uncertain, but it carried enough sincerity to cut through the noise. "I think I saw her name earlier," he said. "In the crew manifest. Lewis, A. Captain rotation. I remember because I was double-checking the regional flight schedules for onboarding." The blonde agent snapped toward him as if he had committed a betrayal. "Do not get involved. You do not know what you are talking about." The trainee swallowed hard. but he did not look away from Ariana. It was only a second of courage, but it was enough to shift the air. The man who had been yelling scoffed. Great. Now the interns are confused too. He waved a dismissive hand. Look at her. She is obviously not a pilot. She did not even correct us. Guilty people stay quiet. Ariana finally spoke, her voice level and unhurried. Silence is not guilt. It is patience. The blonde agent rolled her eyes dramatically. I am tired of this. Security is on the way. If you keep interfering with this counter, we will escalate. Ariana's jaw moved just slightly, the first visible sign of tension, but her posture did not break. She had trained herself to hold steady through storms brighter than this one. She leaned forward just enough for the agent to hear her clearly. Check my credentials. The woman stepped back as if the request was an inconvenience. No, I already told you. Step aside. A ripple of frustration spread through the crowd, not directed at Ariana, but at the stubborn rigidity unfolding in front of them. Someone whispered, why will she not just check the ID? Another muttered, because she already decided. Ariana reached into her pocket, deliberate and slow, and placed her crew badge on the counter. The agent glanced at it without touching it, then pushed it back with one finger. Could be fake. Happens more than you think. That was the moment something inside Ariana clicked into place. She did not raise her voice. She did not plead. She simply reached for her phone and spoke in a tone so steady it made a few onlookers freeze. Initiate pilot verification protocol. Authorization code Lewis 319. A pause. Then a voice answered from the other end, crisp and composed. Protocol activated. Stand by, Captain Lewis. The blonde agent blinked. Captain. But before she could challenge it, a hush rippled through the line as footsteps approached from behind the security lane. Not hurried, not alarmed, purposeful. The kind of footsteps that belonged to someone who did not come when called, but when necessary. Ariana did not turn around. She did not need to. She already knew exactly who it was. The security officer reached the counter first, a tall man with a heavy stride and a badge that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. He looked Ariana up and down with the same dismissive certainty the agent had shown. As if uniform or no uniform, she was already the problem. The blonde agent pointed at Ariana dramatically, her voice rising. She is refusing to move. She is impersonating crew. We need her escorted away from the counter immediately. The officer nodded as if the accusation alone was enough to confirm guilt. He stepped closer, shoulders squared. Ma'am, you need to come with me. Right now. Ariana did not move. The steady calm in her expression contrasted sharply with the adrenaline pulsing through the crowd. Run my credentials, she said again. The officer exhaled impatiently. I do not need to do that. If crew says you are not crew, you are not crew. Let us go. His hand hovered near her arm, not touching her yet, but close enough that a few passengers murmured anxiously. One woman whispered, why is no one checking her badge? This feels wrong. The blonde agent snapped. Because it is fake. She turned toward the man who had been shouting earlier, inviting his agreement. He crossed his arms triumphantly. Exactly. She has probably seen pilots walk through here and decided to try her luck. The trainee who had spoken earlier took a hesitant step forward again. His voice shook, but the words were clear. Her authorization code matched the system. I heard it. That means she is real crew. The agent glared at him as if his honesty was an act of betrayal. You will stay quiet, or you will be written up. Do you understand? The trainee's shoulders tightened, but he did not look away. The officer leaned closer to Ariana. Ma'am, this is your last warning. Ariana's eyes lifted slightly, focused on a point behind him, not in fear, but in recognition. A shadow entered the frame of the terminal windows, then a familiar voice spoke, low and steady. Is there a reason you are detaining one of my pilots? The officer froze. The blonde agent's confidence evaporated instantly. Even the noisy crowd fell into a sudden, strained silence. Stepping through the security lane was a man in a charcoal suit, silver tie, and the unmistakable bearing of someone accustomed to authority. He did not introduce himself. He did not need to. Everyone working for that airline knew the face of Chief Executive Officer Grant Holloway. But the blonde agent was too stunned to process it quickly. Sir, this woman is impersonating crew and refusing to step away. Grant Holloway's expression did not change. Instead, he looked at the badge resting on the counter, then at Ariana. A subtle warmth moved through his face, the kind that comes only from recognition. Ariana Lewis, he said quietly. It has been a long time. A few passengers gasped. The blonde agent's mouth fell open. The shouting man took a half-step back. Grant moved closer, ignoring everyone except Ariana. I did not expect to see you today. Last I heard, you were flying regional routes out of Denver. Ariana nodded once. I transferred last month. The blonde agent stammered. Wait, you know her? Grant turned his head slowly toward the agent, his eyes narrowing in a way that made the air feel heavier. I trained her, he said. At flight school. She was one of the most precise pilots I have ever evaluated. The terminal seemed to shrink into silence. The officer took a full step back from Ariana. Someone in the crowd whispered, she really is a pilot. Grant picked up Ariana's badge from the counter, turning it over in his hand. And you refused to check her credentials? His voice was calm, but the controlled disappointment in his tone was sharper than anger. The agent fumbled for words. Sir, she did not look like. She did not act like. I thought she was. Grant raised a hand, silencing her instantly. You thought, but you did not verify. The shouting man tried to defend himself as well. I was just helping move the line. She did not say she was a pilot. Grant looked at him with a stillness that made the man shrink. She did not need to justify her presence to you. He returned his attention to Ariana, his voice softening. I apologize for this. It should never have happened. Ariana nodded once, accepting the apology without changing the calm expression she had held from the beginning. Grant turned back toward the staff, and everything in his posture made it clear that the real storm was only beginning. Grant Holloway did not need to raise his voice. The weight of his authority filled the space before his words even formed. The blonde agent straightened her blazer as if fabric alone could fix what had already unraveled. The security officer took another step back, his earlier confidence dissolving under the quiet scrutiny now aimed his way. Passengers who had been filming lowered their phones just slightly, sensing that the moment had shifted from confrontation to something far more consequential. Grant placed Ariana's badge gently on the counter, then looked at the trainee who had spoken up earlier. You, he said, what is your name? The young man swallowed hard. Evan, sir. Evan Miller. Grant nodded. Evan, thank you for speaking the truth when it mattered. The blonde agent's face flushed red with disbelief. Sir, he is a trainee. He does not understand protocol. Grant turned toward her with a slow, deliberate precision. Protocol, he repeated, letting the word hang heavy in the air, exists to protect safety, accuracy, and dignity, not to justify bias. The agent's breath hitched as whispers rippled through the crowd. She opened her mouth to defend herself, but no sound came out. Grant shifted his attention to the shouting passenger who had been pointing at Ariana earlier. The man attempted a weak smile, as if to distance himself from his own behavior. I did not mean anything by it, he muttered. I was just trying to help move the line. Grant held his gaze for a long, uncomfortable second. You were not helping, he said. You were contributing to a humiliation you did not hesitate to escalate. The man looked away, suddenly fascinated by the floor tiles. Evan, still standing near the counter, looked from Grant to Ariana, then back to the crowd. His voice was soft, but steady this time. I really did see her name. She was cleared for rotation. I do not know why no one checked. Grant answered before anyone else could speak. Because they made a decision the moment they saw her. And once that decision was made, facts did not matter. The blonde agent pressed a hand to her chest, as if insulted. Sir, that is not fair. Grant's tone stayed even, but the truth in his words was unyielding. What is not fair is a licensed airline pilot having to justify her existence at her own check-in counter. A low murmur of agreement rose from the passengers behind Ariana. People shifted, exchanged glances, reassessed what they had witnessed. Some nodded. Some looked ashamed. And then, quietly, a woman near the back stepped forward. She looked like she had been debating whether to speak. Her voice carried clearly across the terminal's polished floor. I heard you all talking to her before security came. You did not treat her like a question. You treated her like an answer you had already decided. Another passerby added. She showed her badge. Why was that not enough? The blonde agent shot a panicked look toward Grant, but he never broke his gaze. Sir, she tried again. I was only following safety measures. Grant shook his head slowly. Safety measures start with verification, not assumptions. You did not verify anything. His voice remained level, but the controlled disappointment beneath it settled like a verdict. The security officer cleared his throat. Sir, I was only responding to the call made by the counter staff. Grant nodded. And when you arrived, you did not ask a single clarifying question. The officer stiffened, realizing too late that inaction was as visible as aggression. You moved to detain a pilot, Grant continued, without looking at the badge that was directly in front of you. The officer had no answer. Evan, standing a few steps back, looked at Ariana with a mix of respect and regret. I am sorry this happened, he said quietly. Ariana gave him a nod, subtle and gracious, acknowledging the courage he had shown when others chose silence. Grant turned to her then. You should not have had to endure any of this, he said. Not today, not ever, and it will not continue past this moment. The blonde agent's shoulders tensed. The officer shifted his stance. The shouting man held his breath. Because everyone could feel it, Grant Holloway was done observing. He was about to act. The silence that followed Grant Holloway's declaration seemed to stretch across the terminal, tightening like a cable pulled to its limit. Passengers who had once leaned forward for entertainment now stood straight, uneasy, sensing that the moment had grown far larger than an argument at a counter. Ariana held her posture, steady and composed, but behind her calm expression lived a familiar ache. It surfaced without warning, a memory slipping in like a cold draft through an open door. She was 20 years old again, standing outside a hangar in Phoenix after completing her first solo flight. An instructor had approached her, scanned her with the same dismissive eyes she had encountered today, and said, You flew that? Alone? Who signed off on that? The disbelief was sharper than the desert heat. She had smiled through it, just as she did now, but the sting of being questioned before being acknowledged never left her entirely. The memory dissolved as Grant stepped fully between Ariana and the counter staff. His presence alone seemed to draw a boundary that no one dared cross. Evan, the trainee, hovered behind him, still trying to make himself smaller despite having spoken the most sense. The blonde agent clasped her hands together, wringing her fingers in a nervous rhythm. Sir, I promise you, I was not trying to disrespect anyone. I was only doing my job. Grant shook his head slowly. Your job is to identify passengers and crew accurately. Your job is to ensure safe and fair processing. Your job is not to decide who does or does not look like a pilot. The agent opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her excuses had run out faster than her assumptions had. The security officer attempted a similar defense. Mr. Holloway, I responded to the call under the impression that there was a threat at the counter. I was acting within protocol. Grant's reply was calm, but the judgment beneath it was absolute. Protocol begins with observation, not escalation. When you approached, you saw a uniformed pilot presenting identification. Yet you chose force before verification. The officer shifted uncomfortably, his hand brushing the edge of his belt. I did not lay hands on her. You moved to, Grant corrected. Those 3 words landed heavier than any accusation. The shouting man, who had been so loud moments before, now looked smaller than the space around him. He spoke without lifting his eyes. Look, this all got out of hand. I did not know she was really a pilot. Grant's voice dropped, making every syllable sharper. You did not know, but you acted as if you did. That is what bias looks like when it is dressed as certainty. The man pressed his lips together, absorbing the truth he had no defense against. Ariana watched all of it unfold with a quiet strength, the same strength that had carried her through every exam, every check ride, every stereotype she had been forced to outfly. Grant turned back to her. Ariana, please retrieve your badge. She picked it up from the counter, sliding it back onto her uniform with the same precision she brought to every cockpit. Grant addressed the staff again. At any point, you could have verified her credentials. At any point, you could have scanned her badge, checked the system, or simply asked for clarification. Instead, you escalated based on a snap judgment that had no grounds in policy. The blonde agent looked as if she wanted to disappear. Sir, I truly thought. Grant lifted a hand, stopping her. That is the problem. You thought, but you did not check. A murmur of agreement rippled through the surrounding passengers. One woman near the front stepped forward cautiously. I watched her the entire time. She was calm. She was respectful. You all were the ones raising your voices. A man beside her nodded. This could have been avoided in 5 seconds if anyone had bothered to verify her information. Grant scanned the crowd, his gaze briefly softening. Thank you for speaking up. Silence is how these moments repeat themselves. Ariana felt something settle inside her, something that had been tense since the first shout. It was not vindication. It was recognition. Grant looked back at the staff, his tone shifting into something colder, more formal, more final. We are not finished here. The consequences for this will be addressed immediately. And for the first time since the confrontation began, the blonde agent, the security officer, and the shouting man all seemed to grasp that they had not simply misjudged a passenger. They had attempted to erase a pilot standing in plain sight. Grant Holloway's posture shifted, not dramatically, but with a precision that signaled the beginning of something calculated. The air around the counter went taut. Ariana stood just behind him, her presence quiet but unshaken, while passengers watched with the held breath of people who sensed that accountability was about to unfold in real time. Grant tapped his earpiece once. Initiate internal protocol, he said calmly. Category 3. Immediate executive override. Those words traveled through the terminal like a low electrical hum. The blonde agent looked up sharply. Sir, what does that mean? Grant did not answer her directly. Instead, he continued speaking into the receiver. Confirm all call logs from this counter within the last 10 minutes. I want transcripts, audio, and personnel identifications. A beat, and then a voice on the other end replied, confirmed, Mr. Holloway. Gathering now. The security officer's shoulders tensed. He cleared his throat. Sir, is that necessary? Grant's eyes were steady and cold. It is not only necessary, it is overdue. The blonde agent glanced nervously at her computer screen, as if hoping a system error might erase what had just happened. Mr. Holloway, if I may, I only acted based on what appeared suspicious. The uniform did not look official. Grant's head turned slowly. Then your eyes were the problem, not her uniform. The statement cut through the space with surgical precision. But he did not stop there. Tell me, he said. When you saw her walk up to the counter, what exactly did you think you saw? The agent stuttered. I thought she might have been using a costume, or trying to skip the line. Without checking her ID? Without scanning her badge? Grant pressed. She swallowed hard. I thought it was best to be cautious. Grant stepped forward, closing the space between them. Cautious is confirming information. Reckless is deciding someone is lying because they do not match the picture in your mind. A few passengers murmured in agreement. The shouting man, still lingering nearby, lifted his hands in surrender. Look, everybody overreacted. It was not that serious. Grant faced him. When you point at someone and call them a fraud in front of a crowd, it is serious. The man looked away. Evan, the trainee, stepped forward with a courage that surprised even himself. Mr. Holloway, I tried to speak up sooner. I recognized her name from the crew log. Grant nodded. And you did the right thing. You spoke when the truth mattered. The blonde agent shot Evan a glare sharp enough to cut. So now I am the villain for trying to keep the terminal secure? Grant answered before Evan could. Security is not the issue. Bias disguised as security is. A hush fell again. The officer loosened the tension in his jaw. The agent opened her mouth to defend herself, but at that exact moment, Grant's earpiece chimed. Mr. Holloway, the voice said, we have retrieved the counter audio. There are multiple flagged phrases. Would you like them played aloud? The blonde agent went pale. Flagged? She whispered. Grant's tone remained painfully even. Play them. A few seconds passed. Then a recording played through the terminal speakers. The blonde agent's own voice echoed back at her. She does not belong here. Another clip followed. Pilots do not look like her. A third. She is pretending. Passengers stiffened as the truth replayed in crystal clarity. The agent clenched her jaw, fighting tears or anger. It was impossible to tell which. Grant let the silence stretch before he spoke. This is not about one mistake. This is a pattern of behavior that cannot continue in an industry built on trust. The officer lowered his head. The shouting man slowly stepped back into the crowd. Ariana remained still, watching everything unfold with a restraint that made the moment feel even heavier. Grant turned to her with a quiet sincerity. Ariana, this should never have reached this point. She nodded once. But it did. Grant looked at the staff again, his voice firming into something final. We are proceeding to corrective action. And just like that, The temperature in the terminal dropped. Everyone understood that the moment of reckoning had arrived. The passengers stood so still that the terminal felt suspended in time, as if every breath waited for the next word from Grant Holloway. The blonde agent, the security officer, and the shouting man all hovered at the edge of consequence, each of them realizing that the moment had shifted beyond apologies. Grant's gaze swept across the counter staff with a calm that was far more unsettling than anger. "Corrective action begins now," he said. "But before I proceed, there is something everyone in this terminal needs to understand." He stepped slightly aside, giving Ariana room without ever distancing himself from her. "This pilot," he continued, "earned her wings, her hours, and her position the same way every one of our aviators did. But today, none of that mattered to you because you decided that she did not look the part." The blonde agent clutched her hands together as if she could squeeze her mistake into something smaller. Grant turned fully toward Ariana, his tone shifting into something steadier, almost reverent. "Ariana, when I trained you, I remember watching how you handled turbulence. Not the kind outside the aircraft, but the kind inside the training room. Bias, doubt, underestimation. You never let any of it rattle you." Ariana held his gaze. Her voice, when she spoke, was measured and low. "I learned early, sir, that silence is not surrender. It is strategy." The words landed with an undeniable force, echoing through the stunned crowd. Grant nodded slowly. "You are right. And today, your silence revealed something that words could not." He turned to the staff again. "It revealed every assumption you made about her." The blonde agent exhaled sharply, teetering between anger and remorse. "Sir, please, I did not know who she was." Grant replied with perfect stillness. "You did not need to know who she was. You needed to respect who she could be." The agent's face crumpled. Evan, standing behind her, whispered barely loud enough to hear. "She tried to tell you." Grant continued. "In aviation, misjudgment is not a small error. It is dangerous. It is costly. And the moment you believe you can identify competence by appearance, you have already compromised safety." He stepped forward, holding Ariana's badge. "This badge is not a costume. It is the symbol of 1,500 hours of training, testing, and proving yourself in some of the most demanding airspace in this country." He placed the badge into Ariana's hand with quiet respect. Then came the moment that shifted the terminal once more. Grant's voice deepened, dropping into the cadence of someone about to deliver a verdict. "You called her a fraud," he said, "in the very airline she serves." His eyes locked onto the blonde agent. "You told her she did not look like a pilot. But the truth is far simpler." He turned slightly, facing the entire crowd. "She is a pilot. And today, she is the most qualified person standing at this counter." A ripple of shock moved through the passengers, followed by a rising wave of applause from those who had witnessed everything. Ariana did not smile, but something in her shoulders loosened. Grant let the applause fade naturally before speaking again. "I want everyone here to hear me clearly. No one questions her place again." He paused, allowing the silence to land exactly where it needed to. Then Ariana stepped forward, her voice level and unwavering, carrying the final line of the moment like a blade gliding through still air. "You mistook my silence for doubt," she said. "That was your last mistake." The terminal erupted again, the sound rising like a long, overdue acknowledgement. Grant did not look away from his staff. "This is far from over for you," he said. "Consequences begin immediately." And every person standing behind that counter understood that the next words he spoke would change the course of their careers forever. The applause faded into a dense quiet that wrapped itself around the counter, a silence so complete that every breath, every shift of weight, felt amplified. The blonde agent's hands trembled on the edge of the desk. The security officer's jaw tightened. The shouting man pressed himself deeper into the crowd, as if distance alone might rewrite his involvement. Grant Holloway stood unmoving, the calm center of the storm he had just unleashed. When he spoke again, his voice was measured, deliberate, and devastating. "Effective immediately," he said. "All staff actions at this counter are frozen under executive review. Access credentials for anyone involved in this incident will be suspended pending audit." The blonde agent gasped. "Suspended? Sir, please, I need my terminal access to work. I have a shift this afternoon." Grant nodded once. And yet you denied someone else the ability to do her job without ever checking a fact. Consider this the beginning of accountability. A soft chime echoed from the agent's computer. Her screen flashed red. Lockout. Admin override. She stared at it in disbelief. This cannot be happening. Grant looked at the security officer next. Officer Hale, your report from this incident will be reviewed. Until then, your authorization to respond to non-emergency terminal calls is temporarily revoked. The officer stiffened. Mr. Holloway, with respect, I did not intend harm. Grant replied calmly. Intent is not the measure here. Impact is. Another chime sounded. The officer's device flashed the same red lockout. The shouting passenger attempted to slip away, but Grant's voice stopped him before he could disappear fully into the crowd. Sir, do not walk away. You escalated a situation you had no authority to involve yourself in. Your statements and conduct will be added to the report. The man froze, shoulders drawn tight. I did not mean to cause trouble. Grant's reply was cold but controlled. You did not mean to, but you did. Ariana watched each reaction with a stillness that masked the quiet thrum of memory rising again inside her. She remembered sitting through a disciplinary hearing at flight school where another student accused her of cheating because she must have gotten special treatment. No one defended her then. No instructor stood by her side. She had walked into that room alone. But today she was not alone. Grant stepped closer to the counter, his tone shifting into the crisp clarity of command. Internal audit will receive full documentation within the hour. Video, audio, eyewitness statements, and counter logs will be included. This incident is no longer contained to this terminal. It is now an official airline matter. Passengers exchanged glances. A woman near the front raised her hand slightly, as if entering a classroom. Sir, if statements help, many of us saw everything. Grant nodded with genuine gratitude. Your willingness to speak matters. Silence allows patterns like this to repeat. The blonde agent wiped her cheek, anger and humiliation blending in a way that left her voice unsteady. Sir, are we being fired? Grant's answer was immediate. Not yet, but you are being held responsible. His eyes sharpened. Consequences only feel harsh when accountability has been absent for too long. Her breath came out shaky as she looked around for support, but none came. Evan, the trainee who had spoken up, stepped forward again, gathering what remained of his courage. Mr. Holloway, he said, I want to help with the report. I want to be completely honest about what happened. Grant gave him a small nod, the closest thing to approval anyone from the staff had earned today. Your integrity will be noted. Ariana watched Evan with quiet appreciation. She recognized that moment for what it was. The first decision in the rest of his career, the moment he chose truth over comfort. Grant turned back to her. Ariana, before we conclude this on-site action, is there anything you would like to say? The entire terminal leaned in. Ariana stepped forward, her voice controlled and resonant. Only this, she said. When people decide who you are before you speak, they are not judging you. They are revealing themselves. A ripple moved through the crowd, not applause this time, but something heavier, something like realization. Grant nodded. Well said. He lifted his chin slightly, signaling the final stage of executive action. This concludes the preliminary response. Formal decisions will be issued within hours. And with that, the collapse of everything that had stood against Ariana moments earlier became unmistakably complete. Their authority stripped, their certainty shattered, their assumptions exposed in front of an entire terminal that would not forget what it had witnessed. The terminal had begun to settle back into its usual rhythm, but the atmosphere around the counter remained charged, as if the air itself refused to forget what had happened. Passengers gradually lowered their phones, yet their eyes stayed fixed on Ariana and Grant, witnessing the final moments of a confrontation that had already etched itself into their memories. Grant took a steady breath and addressed the crowd one last time. You have all seen how quickly assumptions can turn into actions, and how those actions can harm the very people who keep this industry running. What happened here was not a misunderstanding. It was a failure of judgment, respect, and professional responsibility. The blonde agent looked down at her locked-out screen, tears forming in the corners of her eyes. The security officer kept his hands clasped behind his back, posture rigid, as if hoping discipline could shield him from consequence. The shouting man lingered behind a family of four, trying to blend into the background, But the weight of his earlier words hung over him like a shadow he could not outrun. Grant continued, "This airline will not tolerate discriminatory conduct disguised as caution. Every member of our staff is expected to treat our passengers and our crew with dignity. That standard was not met today, and the consequences will reflect that." He turned to Ariana then, not as a superior addressing a subordinate, but as a colleague acknowledging another's strength. "Ariana, you handled this with more composure than the situation deserved." She nodded once, her voice steady but carrying the quiet weight of lived history. "I learned a long time ago that dignity is not something you wait for. It is something you hold, even when others try to strip it away." Grant nodded, his expression reflecting the gravity of her words. "And today, you reminded everyone here what true professionalism looks like." Evan, the trainee, stepped forward again, as if compelled by conscience. "Captain Lewis," he said softly, "I am sorry this happened. I should have insisted sooner." Ariana turned to him with genuine appreciation. "You spoke when you could. That mattered." The blonde agent wiped her eyes and finally found her voice, thin and cracking. "Captain Lewis, I am sorry. I did not mean to hurt you." Ariana held her gaze for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "I believe you did not intend harm," she said. "But intention does not undo impact. What matters now is whether this moment changes anything." The agent lowered her head, understanding that the apology was not an eraser but an acknowledgement. Grant addressed the officer next. "Officer Hale, I expect your report to reflect full transparency. Your training will be reassessed, and your reauthorization will depend on it." Hale nodded stiffly. "Yes, sir." Then Grant turned to the shouting passenger. "As for you, your statements will be included in the official incident documentation. You had no authority to intervene, and yet you chose to escalate a situation based on assumptions." The man swallowed hard. "I understand. I truly am sorry." Grant did not offer comfort. "Growth begins with discomfort. I hope you carry this moment forward." The crowd shifted, their expressions reflecting a collective realization that they had all witnessed something systemic laid bare and confronted in real time. Grant finally stepped aside, allowing Ariana to move toward the crew lane. The employees who had opposed her moments earlier parted silently, no longer gatekeepers but observers of a truth they could not rewrite. As Ariana walked, a ripple of quiet respect followed her. Some passengers nodded. Others placed a hand over their heart. A child even waved shyly. She acknowledged them with a small, steady gesture, then reached the crew checkpoint. Before stepping through, she turned back toward the terminal, her voice carrying with the clarity of a final declaration. "I did not raise my voice today," she said. "I raised the standard." A hush fell over the crowd, not out of shock, but out of the profound recognition that her words would outlast this moment. Grant watched her go, pride flickering across his face. The blonde agent and Officer Hale remained frozen, confronted by the consequences of their choices. And the passengers, now witnesses to a story that would travel far beyond that terminal, stood anchored in the realization that justice had unfolded not through anger, but through truth. Ariana stepped through the crew door, the scanner lighting green instantly. A quiet beep confirmed her identity, her authority, and her rightful place. And just like that, she disappeared down the hallway, leaving behind a standard that no one in that terminal would ever forget.